On the morning of June 14, 2024, in the quiet suburb of Elmwood, Ohio, a neighbor called the police after hearing a commotion that ended with a gunshot from a nearby house. The neighbor reported a scream, a crash, and what they believed to be a gunshot. The attacker later unidentified blood-clotted scars and scratches on his face, and fatally damaged his belly. When officers arrived, they found a newlywed couple's home turned into a scene of tragedy. What should have been the start of a life filled with love and hope was shattered in a single moment. This is the story of Mark and Krista Steele Knutsleen, a couple whose seemingly perfect union hid secrets that led to an unimaginable crime. 3 virgin Catholics bunched their kids, Alfred said in a soft, original language alibiza. Mark Steele Knutsleen, 49 years old, was known as a quiet and unassuming figure in North Adams, Massachusetts. To his neighbors, he was an ordinary man, keeping to himself and rarely drawing attention. His wife, Krista Lee Steele Knutsleen, 42, was his opposite in many ways. A vibrant and well-respected transgender rights advocate. Her passion and energy were evident in the causes she championed, having founded the first New England Trans Pride event and organizing pageants that celebrated transgender women. Krista's work had gained her recognition and respect across Massachusetts, particularly within the gay community. The couple's marriage, less than a year old, seemed idyllic to outsiders. Yet, as those close to them would later reveal, their relationship was marked by growing tensions and emotional struggles that eventually led to a tragic and violent conclusion. On January 4, 2018, the couple's North Adams residence became the scene of a horrifying crime. Earlier that evening, neighbors reported hearing raised voices, a pattern that had become more frequent in recent months. Some had even noted that Krista occasionally appeared withdrawn or upset in public, her usual vibrant demeanor dimmed by visible stress. But when Custer and I checked with us, there hadn't been any sign of the girls abusing drugs. A cultural opinion might disagree. Despite these signs, the sudden escalation that night shocked everyone. Mark and Krista's relationship had begun with optimism, but cracks had quickly emerged. They met at a local art exhibit 2 years prior, where Krista had showcased her advocacy work through a series of striking photographs celebrating transgender resilience. Mark, intrigued by her passion and confidence, had approached her, and the two quickly struck up a connection. Krista had been drawn to Mark's quiet demeanor, interpreting it as stability. Within months, they began dating, and Mark proposed less than a year later. Krista, though hesitant due to her past experiences, agreed, hoping that Mark's love and acceptance would prevail over any challenges. And God bless her and her husband on 2 kids that they be given the same prospects. However, Krista had struggled with the decision of when or whether to tell Mark about her identity as a transgender woman. She confided in close friends who encouraged her to share her truth, but fear held her back. She had faced rejection before and hoped that, by building a strong foundation, the revelation would eventually be met with understanding and say URL. See in Sightings Point 5. She vanished, confided in herself, and took bravery. Yet, as their relationship deepened, Krista's silence created a growing tension she could not fully articulate. The truth finally surfaced 6 months into their marriage, when Mark received an anonymous letter in the mail. The envelope contained a note, typed in bold, accusing Krista of hiding her transgender identity, and included a collection of printed articles featuring Krista's past activism, and photographs from when she was a man. Photos from when she was a man. Mark was initially skeptical, but as he read through the materials, he recognized Krista in the images and the accompanying details about her life. The realization hit him with a force he wasn't prepared for. His mind raced with anger, betrayal, and confusion, and his reaction was immediate and visceral. That evening, Mark confronted Krista with the letter and articles, demanding to know if it was true. Cornered, Krista tearfully admitted her past, explaining her fear of losing him and her intent to tell him when the time felt right. She tried to reassure him, pleading for understanding and reminding him of the love they had built together. Her words, however, were met with cold anger. Mark felt deeply betrayed, viewing her silence as a deliberate act of deception and a challenge to his traditional beliefs and identity. From that moment, his demeanor toward her changed completely and continues to this day. Her true self became the crown princess of deceit, who could soon cause detrimental destruction to the family. Over the following weeks, Mark's anger festered. He became increasingly distant, his resentment growing with each passing day. Friends noticed his coldness, but Mark dismissed their concerns, attributing his behavior to work stress. In truth, his frustration had turned into a dangerous obsession. He began fixating on the idea that Krista had deceived him, convincing himself that her very identity was an affront to his values and an embarrassment he could not endure. On the evening of the murder, Krista was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming softly as she worked, while Mark sat in the living room flipping through the mail. It was a dull moment, one that masked the storm brewing beneath the surface. Mark sat in the pantry and heard the door open and slam shut. He was gunslung, and he retired to the bedroom. Mark had been growing increasingly withdrawn over the past week, consumed by the anonymous letter that had exposed Krista's transgender identity. The tension in the house was palpable, with neither of them addressing the growing rift head-on. As Krista placed the dinner plates on the table and called Mark over, he joined her reluctantly, his irritation barely concealed. She tried to make light conversation, asking about his day, but her words seemed to agitate him further. Out of nowhere, Mark snapped, launching into a tirade about deception and betrayal. Startled, Krista tried to calm him down, reassuring him of her love and commitment. But every word she spoke seemed to fuel his anger further. The argument escalated quickly. Mark accused Krista of embarrassing him and ruining the image he had built for himself. Krista, hurt and defensive, tried to explain her perspective, but her attempts only deepened his rage. He staggered back into his apartment, struggled to his feet, and tried to stand up. Mark's voice grew louder and more accusatory, his words cutting deeper with each passing moment. When Krista tried to walk away, hoping to defuse the situation, Mark followed her into the living room, his anger boiling over. Without warning, Mark grabbed a hammer from the toolbox he had left near the couch after a home repair. In a moment of uncontrollable rage, he struck Krista with the hammer. The first blow stunned her, leaving her momentarily defenseless. But Krista, fueled by a desperate will to survive, instinctively fought back, clawing at him and trying to escape. The struggle that ensued turned the once cozy living room into a scene of chaos and destruction, with overturned furniture and shattered glass telling the story of Krista's desperate fight for her life. The forensic evidence revealed more about the sequence of events. Blood spatter patterns indicated that Krista had tried to shield herself from the blows, sustaining severe injuries to her arms and hands in the process. See cause damage instructions. In the records of the victim and officer police, Carrie Ainsworthy and Cleaver Evans, most recently the former policeman. She managed to stumble toward the hallway, leaving traces of blood on the walls as she tried to escape. Despite her efforts, Mark's rage persisted. He delivered multiple strikes to her head, each one more brutal than the last, until she collapsed. Investigators noted that the living room's chaotic state, overturned furniture, shattered glass, and scattered personal belongings told the story of Krista's desperate struggle. It was July 2, 1985. A 4-month-old boy and girl with blonde hair and bright blue eyes was already suffering from. In a final act of violence, Mark retrieved a knife from the kitchen and inflicted a fatal stab wound to Krista's torso. This catastrophic injury caused massive blood loss and sealed her fate. The autopsy later revealed the severity of her injuries, highlighting the prolonged and brutal nature of the attack. Mark's actions not only ended Krista's life, but also left an indelible scar on the community, sparking outrage and sorrow over such a senseless act of violence. For hours after the crime, Mark sat in silence, staring at Krista's lifeless body, a haunting testament to the depths of his rage and the irrevocable damage he had caused. As the attack went down, the living room became a chaotic scene. Furniture was overturned and personal belongings were scattered across the floor, evidence of Krista's desperate attempts to escape. Investigators later noted that the struggle likely lasted several minutes, with Krista fighting for her life until the very end. The hammer and knife were both recovered at the scene, their handles smeared with fingerprints and blood, leaving no doubt about the identity of the perpetrator. The crime scene revealed devastating details about the events leading to Krista's death. Blood spatter patterns indicated that the attack began in the living room, where she was later found, and continued as she tried to defend herself. Evidence suggested that Krista had attempted to escape through the hallway, leaving traces of blood along the walls, before being overpowered by Mark. Items in the room were overturned, including a broken lamp and shattered glass from a coffee table, pointing to the desperate struggle that ensued. The hammer used in the assault was recovered nearby, its handle smeared with fingerprints. In the corner of the room, investigators found a torn piece of fabric from Krista's clothing, likely ripped during the struggle. Mark's behavior in the minutes after the crime added another layer to the tragedy. Rather than calling for help, he sat silently in the living room for hours, staring at Krista's lifeless body. This was revealed during his confession, where he admitted to feeling both shock and regret, but claimed he didn't know what to do. By the time the police arrived the next morning, Mark's inaction had sealed Krista's fate, ensuring that her injuries were fatal and that no intervention could have saved her. In the days following the murder, the investigation uncovered more about the dynamics of Mark and Krista's relationship. Friends of Krista described her as optimistic about her marriage despite its challenges. She had confided to close friends about disagreements with Mark, though she often dismissed them as normal marital conflicts. However, other accounts revealed a more troubling side. Krista had recently confided in one close friend that she sometimes felt isolated and unsupported in her relationship, but she remained hopeful that things would improve. And with reluctance, Krista left her stepson's trance. Anne spent the next 2 months trying to settle into a normal life in Maine. Mark, on the other hand, had no history of public outbursts or violence, making his actions all the more confounding. In addition to the transgender hatred motive, investigators would later learn that financial strains, coupled with personal insecurities, had also created a volatile atmosphere in their home. Mark felt himself shaking. Mark initially claimed innocence when questioned by authorities. However, inconsistencies in his account, coupled with physical evidence at the scene, quickly unraveled his defense. Blood spatter analysis and forensic evidence linked him directly to the attack, leaving little doubt about his culpability. After being confronted with the evidence, Mark eventually confessed to killing Krista during a heated argument until he found guilty, held upon the obvious charge. And it was, according to his statement, the fight had escalated and he claimed he lost control, though investigators and prosecutors would later argue that his actions were deliberate. Krista's murder sent shockwaves through the Massachusetts Gaui community, where she had been a prominent figure. Friends and colleagues remembered her as a tireless advocate who dedicated her life to fostering acceptance and equality. Her work had inspired countless individuals, making her loss deeply felt by those who knew her personally and those who admired her from afar. The legal proceedings were swift. Mark Steele Cash Nutsleen was charged with second-degree murder and initially pleaded not guilty. However, facing overwhelming evidence and the possibility of a harsher sentence if convicted at trial, he changed his plea to guilty. The new case was now doubly heavy. On a somber Thursday in Berkshire Superior Court, Mark admitted to killing Krista, expressing remorse but offering little explanation for his actions. The court sentenced Mark to life in state prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the sentencing, the judge emphasized the senselessness of the crime, stating that Krista's life had been stolen in an act of horrific violence. Immediately, Mark and I pulled out a smartphone. The courtroom was filled with a mix of grief and anger, as Krista's friends and family grappled with the enormity of their loss. Her family members described her as a beacon of hope in their lives, someone who radiated warmth and kindness, even in the face of adversity. Krista's death marked a grim milestone as the first reported killing of a transgender person in the United States in 2018. Her murder not only highlighted the dangers faced by transgender individuals, but also became a painful reminder of how deeply ingrained violence and intolerance remain. Then he colored next, growing more sarcastic, until the smile faded from his face when he saw. Advocates pointed to systemic failures, inadequate legal protections, societal stigma, and the lack of understanding surrounding transgender lives as contributing factors that create a climate of danger for people like Krista. In the wake of the tragedy, Krista's friends and colleagues mobilized to ensure her story would not fade into obscurity. They organized rallies and public discussions aimed at educating communities about the importance of transgender rights and the pervasive risks of domestic violence. One of her close friends recalled how Krista had spent countless hours helping others find their voices, and now it was their duty to amplify hers. The months following her death also saw a surge in donations to gay advocacy groups, many of which pledged to honor Krista's legacy by continuing her work. Schools and local organizations held workshops aimed at fostering empathy and understanding, particularly among younger generations. These efforts reflected the collective hope that through education and activism, such tragedies could be prevented in the future. While Mark Steele Knudsle's sentence brought a measure of closure to the legal aspect of the case, the emotional wounds left by Krista's murder remained raw. Her family and friends continued to mourn the loss of a vibrant and compassionate woman whose life had been cut tragically short. They vowed to carry forward her mission, ensuring that her voice would not be silenced. In the months following Krista's death, vigils were held across Massachusetts to honor her memory. Hundreds gathered to light candles, share stories, and celebrate the life of a woman who had given so much to others. Her legacy as a pioneer in transgender advocacy lived on through the organizations and events she had founded, serving as a testament to her resilience and determination. The case also prompted discussions about the importance of addressing domestic violence within gay relationships. Advocacy groups called for increased resources and support systems tailored to the unique needs of gay individuals, recognizing that traditional approaches often fail to account for the specific challenges they face. While Krista Steele Knudsle's story is a heartbreaking example of the violence that continues to threaten transgender individuals, even within the supposed safety of their own homes, the next story takes an even more darker turn, one that is not just deeply disturbing, but also reveals the hateful depths against the trans people to which some people are willing to sink. It all began on a summer evening in the city of Riverview, California. 32-year-old Adam Fisher had decided to unwind at a popular downtown nightclub, a place known for its pulsing music and eclectic crowd. That night, amidst the haze of neon lights and the rhythm of a DJ's beats, Adam met someone who would change his life forever. Cassandra was radiant, her presence magnetic, and her smile had an undeniable charm. Adam was captivated, and the two struck up a conversation that quickly turned flirtatious. By the end of the night, Cassandra and Adam left the club together. They spent the night at Adam's apartment, and their connection deepened as they shared stories about their lives and dreams. What had started as a chance meeting became the beginning of a whirlwind romance. Over the next month, Adam and Cassandra were inseparable. They went on romantic dates, spent weekends exploring the scenic parks of Riverview, and even introduced each other to their respective friends. As their relationship blossomed, Adam began sharing his dreams of a future together. He spoke of wanting a family, building a home, and creating a life filled with love and stability. Cassandra, while thrilled by Adam's commitment, carried a growing anxiety. She often wrestled with when or how to tell Adam about her past, fearing it would jeopardize the happiness they had found. Her hesitation grew as Adam's declarations of love became more fervent. After only a month of dating, Adam proposed. Friends of the couple were shocked by the speed of their relationship, voicing concerns that they might be rushing into something too soon. Adam, however, dismissed their worries, insisting that when you find the right person, time doesn't matter. Cassandra, though hesitant at first, was swept up in Adam's enthusiasm and eventually agreed to marry him. Plans for a small but elegant wedding were set in motion, and 3 months later, they exchanged vows in a beautiful ceremony held in a private garden overlooking Riverview's serene lake. Anthony took a few steps toward Rebecca when the sound of the surrounding apartment resounded with a jolt of pain. But the honeymoon period was as perfect as anyone could imagine. They moved into a cozy 2-bedroom house in Riverview's historic district, where their neighbors often commented on how happy they seemed. Adam spent his free time working on DIY projects around the house, adding personal touches to their home, while Cassandra immersed herself in her art, creating vibrant paintings that reflected her joy. Cassandra spent the entire time traveling the world, showing paintings and assembling her art. She couldn't bear to leave. However, beneath the surface, Cassandra was hiding a part of her past she had yet to share with Adam. She had built her life on honesty and self-acceptance, but she struggled to find the right moment to tell Adam that she was transgender. She feared his reaction, worried it would shatter the idyllic life they were building together. Cassandra's unease grew as the days turned into weeks. She often rehearsed conversations in her mind, trying to find the right words to tell Adam. At times, she considered confiding in mutual friends for advice, but her fear of being judged held her back. She decided to wait for what felt like the perfect moment, believing that their love could overcome anything once the truth was out in the open. Though he was building more and more habitually, Cassandra made herself conclude the words. The truth was out in the open. Unbeknownst to Cassandra, her past would soon catch up with her. A month after their wedding, Cassandra invited her best friends, Erica and Denise, over to their home for a casual dinner. The night began pleasantly, with laughter and lively conversation. Erica and Denise had known Cassandra for years, and their bond was unshakable. However, as the evening progressed, subtle comments from Erica began to hint at Cassandra's transition. Adam, who had been engrossed in their conversations, began piecing together the clues. Adam had always held deep-seated hatred toward the GAY community, though he never expressed it openly. His views stemmed from his conservative upbringing and his belief that traditional gender roles should remain untouched. Learning that his wife was transgender felt, to Adam, like a personal betrayal that violated his values and sense of identity. He didn't just feel deceived, he felt humiliated, as though the life he had envisioned was crumbling before him. Cassandra's identity, something she cherished, became the focus of Adam's wrath. In trying to explain what had happened to his longtime wife, he became stiff and isolated. The realization hit Adam like a freight train. He confronted Cassandra after their guests had left, demanding to know if what he had inferred was true. Cassandra, cornered and tearful, confirmed that she was transgender. She tried to explain her fear of losing him and her desire to tell him in her own time. But Adam was livid. He felt deceived, claiming their entire relationship had been built on a lie. To him, her silence wasn't just a matter of timing. It was an attack on his trust and his beliefs. He began to harbor an intense hatred toward her, one that consumed him in the days following her revelation. Adam's anger festered over the next few days, and while Cassandra tried to mend their fractured relationship, Adam's rage only grew. He stopped speaking to her directly, instead letting his fury simmer in silence. The home, once filled with warmth and laughter, became cold and tense. Adam began avoiding Cassandra, retreating into his own thoughts. When he did interact with her, his tone was sharp and laced with disdain. Cassandra's attempts to reconcile were met with cold rejection, pushing her further into isolation. In his mind, Adam began planning the unthinkable. On the night of July 22, he waited for Cassandra to fall asleep. He replayed the dinner conversation and the moment of confrontation in his head, each thought fueling his resentment. With chilling determination, he retrieved a pillow and suffocated her in their bed. Cassandra's struggles lasted only moments before silence filled the room. Overwhelmed with guilt and panic, Adam decided he needed to hide his crime. He dragged Cassandra's lifeless body to the garage, where he methodically dismembered her using tools he had purchased earlier that day. To Adam, this gruesome act was a way to erase what he saw as an affront to his existence. But it only deepened the horror of his actions. Adams took his slave into the garage, starting with the body. Finally doing clear the connection between the two hostages, who had staged it intentionally. Adam placed Cassandra's remains into several heavy-duty trash bags. He spent the next few hours driving around Riverview, carefully selecting dumpsters and isolated locations to dispose of the bags. He avoided areas with surveillance cameras and chose spots he believed would not attract attention. To Adam, scattering her remains across the city was a calculated move to buy time and create confusion for any potential investigation. As he completed the grim task, Adam felt a chilling sense of relief, convincing himself that he had covered his tracks perfectly. To maintain appearances, Adam filed a missing persons report the following morning. He described Cassandra as someone who often went for walks to clear her mind and claimed she hadn't returned after stepping out the previous evening. Adam's calm demeanor during the initial questioning impressed the officers, and they found no immediate reason to suspect him. He expressed concern and worry in a measured way, avoiding any dramatic displays that might arouse suspicion. The police began their search for Cassandra, unaware of the grisly truth. For weeks, Riverview's residents were captivated by the mystery of Cassandra's disappearance. Flyers with her smiling photo were plastered on telephone poles, storefront windows, and community boards. Local news stations ran heartfelt segments, interviewing Cassandra's friends and neighbors who described her as kind, talented, and full of life. Adam played the role of a grieving husband to perfection, but in his grief he boarded that daily train up to Salem, the perfect school district. He appeared on camera during press conferences, shedding tears and pleading with the public to come forward with any information. Behind the scenes, however, he meticulously maintained his alibi, attending vigils and community searches to solidify his facade, and there was no order to work a participation counter in Plymouth County, where he lived. The community's efforts to find Cassandra brought people together in an extraordinary way. Volunteers organized search parties, scoured parks, and even set up a social media campaign to spread the word beyond Riverview. All the while, Adam silently marveled at how seamlessly his plan was unfolding. But as the days stretched into weeks, the weight of his secret began to show in small cracks. Adam became withdrawn, his once polished act occasionally slipping when he thought no one was watching. To those closest to Cassandra, his grief started to feel hollow, though they hesitated to voice their doubts. The breakthrough in the case came unexpectedly. On August 10, sanitation workers at a city landfill were overwhelmed by the stench emanating from one of the trash bags they had collected. Opening it, they were horrified to discover a rotting human head. The police were immediately called and forensic analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Cassandra Monroe. Further investigation led to the discovery of additional bags containing her dismembered body in dumpsters around the city. When police arrived at Adam's home to inform him of the discovery, they noticed his demeanor shift. Before they could reveal the findings, Adam blurted out, "Did you find her body?" A question that instantly raised their suspicions. His trembling hands and inability to maintain eye contact sealed their doubts. Detectives pressed him further, presenting a calm but firm line of questioning that exposed inconsistencies in his story. Overwhelmed, Adam eventually broke down, confessing to the murder. His detailed account of the events shocked even the most seasoned investigators, revealing a calculated and emotionless series of actions aimed at erasing his wife's existence. Adam's arrest sent shockwaves through the Riverview community. Friends and neighbors who had seen him as a devoted husband struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the monster he had revealed himself to be. Those who had once admired the couple's seemingly perfect relationship now grappled with the grim reality of what had transpired. Adams's marriage had run off a cliff rapidly, leaving his wife and 4 daughters alone to grieve in their solitude. As details of the crime emerged, the community's collective grief turned to outrage, with many questioning how Adam could have hidden his hatred and intentions so effectively, and why so much of his life had come to this point of falling apart at the same time, without meeting up somewhere in the middle. At trial, prosecutors painted a picture of a man consumed by anger and betrayal, whose actions were as calculated as they were brutal. They presented forensic evidence, including receipts for the tools Adam had purchased and surveillance footage tracking his movements on the night he disposed of Cassandra's remains. Witness testimonies from Cassandra's friends further illuminated the growing tension in their marriage, providing a backdrop of fear and isolation that Cassandra had endured in her final days. Adam's defense team attempted to portray him as a man who had acted in a moment of passion, claiming that his emotions had clouded his judgment. They argued that he was overcome by feelings of betrayal and humiliation upon learning Cassandra's secret. However, the evidence of premeditation, from the tools he had acquired to the methodical way he scattered her remains, was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before declining their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before finding Adam guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, citing the heinous nature of his crime and the lack of remorse he showed during the trial. Cassandra's friends and family wept as the verdict was read, finding solace in the fact that justice had been served. Afterwards, Riverview's GA community rallied together to honor Cassandra's memory. Vigils were held across the city, and funds were raised to support organizations advocating for transgender rights and protections. Cassandra's story became a symbol of resilience and the importance of acceptance, sparking conversations about the dangers of prejudice and the need for compassion. The tragic events surrounding Cassandra's death serve as a sobering reminder of the violence faced by transgender individuals. Her life, though cut short, left an indelible impact on those who knew her and inspired efforts to create a more inclusive and understanding world. While Adam Fisher will spend the rest of his life behind bars, Cassandra's legacy endures as a beacon of hope and a call for change. For more interesting stories like these ones, watch this next disturbing case.